They were at
Well,
7 o'clock now.
yeah. Here we are at 7 o'clock. Pleased to have you all with me. I'm Jim Hilker. I've been a professor here and extension marketing economist for the past 30 years at Michigan State University. I'm in the Department of Agriculture, Food, and Resource Economics. Other pertinent players in this are Dennis Stein, who is a farm management extension educator who is responsible for marketing and risk management items such as these, and Steve Evans, who's behind the scenes right here. This is put on by Michigan State University Extension and Michigan Corn. Michigan Corn is made up of the Michigan Corn Association and the Corn Checkoff program, and we thank them for being a big part of this as well. We're going to go for 2 nights a week for 4 weeks. We're going to have 2 nights this week, and then we have a week off, and then we'll go at it the 3rd and 4th week of February and finish it up the first week of March. There's about 100 people out there. A majority of them are at home on their own computers, but we also have 4 sites where people are together. I'll be flipping through these notes here. These sessions will be taped. As some of you may have read through this here, they'll be available for review. Think of them as your video book. Also, the notes, everything that you see written out here, as well as filled in worksheets, will be available on my webpage, which we'll look at a little bit the next day. And if people have trouble getting off the webpage, I can send it to them directly. We'll talk a little bit about some worksheets and how you'll know whether you should print them off and what material is just there to kind of look at. Questions can be typed in. I have this great big long, I guess in here how to do it here, big long place here where I can read your questions. They're right in front of me. You can type them in. I'll answer them verbally. If we don't get all the questions answered, I'll have all the questions. I'll answer them by email to the group or post them on my webpage. Other times, a lot of times I'll begin with a review, and we'll answer those questions at the beginning of the review. So to continue motoring along here, this is the web page. In a little while, I'm going to tell you that the focus of this meeting is not price forecasting. And then I show you this web page where I talk a lot about price forecasting. I have a couple jobs here at the university. One of them is doing the market outlook for corn, wheat, soybeans, hogs, and cattle. And the other one is teaching about marketing tools and pricing, and that's the main part of this. But this website is available for that type of information. Down towards the bottom of the web page, all 3 of these pages I just flipped through are on the same web page. I have the introductory pricing workshop here, and the introductory and outline is at the beginning. Some of you better read. The stuff I want printed off, I'll put right in this area here where the pointer is. Hopefully tonight, if you didn't do it, it's not a real big deal because I'll be sending you the information with the handwritten numbers in it. But the pricing decision chart for sellers, the hedge table, and the basis chart. Over here it just says sample, but from this point on, tomorrow morning, I'll take all these notes, and this is where they'll be posted. So if you miss anything, there's 2 ways of getting it, the video and the notes. Down to the lower part here is just background material. We won't be using them directly, but if you want to sort of get other information, that's a place to go to and read about it. The goal of the workshop right here. To be in a position to work with your grain merchandisers, your elevator, whoever it is you work with, to use pricing tools such as cash sales, forward contracts, hedging, options, minimum price contracts, to understand, first to be able to understand them and be able to recognize the correct market situation for each pricing tool. And the market tells us often which tool we should use. In fact, almost always it tells us which tool we should use, or at least is an indicator of it. As I said, the workshop does not focus on forecasting prices, but rather what you should do given a price forecast. I know I've been writing an Outlook article in the Michigan Farm News for the past 20-some years and the Michigan Farmer for 10 years before that. I often say things like you should hedge, consider a hedge, or you should consider locking in your basis. I often wonder, do they really know what I mean? By the end of this workshop, hopefully you'll know what I mean and be able to put it to better use. Why do we need these pricing tools? Well, you know, when the price was down here about 5 years ago, we may not have known it was a good price or not, but we did know that it had dropped. Again, we don't know whether prices are going up or down, but if we're over here, like we were late in 2011, and prices are over $7, is there a way we can lock in that $7, whether prices continue to go up or whether they don't? This is a little bit hard on me here. I'm used to standing up, seeing faces, running around the front of the room. Now I have to sit here and imagine it. That's hard for me. You'll probably be glad when my face is replaced by a worksheet. But the markets go down, the markets go up. Is there things we can do about it? These are just the futures markets. We're going to talk a little bit about the futures markets is not the price you get. You end up getting a cash price, but we can use the futures market and that cash price and the differences between them to determine where we ought to be. Back here a year ago, we had a chance to lock in 640 prices for corn to be delivered after harvest this year. Now, we didn't know whether prices were going to go up or whether prices were going to go down. But what we did know is that price probably more than covered our cost of production, especially if we had some revenue insurance. Little bit what we're going to do this first week, today and Wednesday. We've kind of done an introduction and an explanation of the goals. We're going to talk a little bit about futures markets. We won't know every single thing about them, but we'll put up some readings to help too. We're going to talk about cash markets, the basis, which is the spread between the futures and cash market. And as you'll see time and time again through this workshop, this basis is really the key to knowing which pricing tools we ought to be using. We're going to talk about the 4 possible market situations here in a second. In fact, that's what we'll go to next. We're going to maybe talk a little bit about some various pricing tools just to show you when they would be and show you that we'd use different ones for each one of these 4 marketing alternatives. And then we're going to start working on a hedge. Now, it's possible that some of you will never do a hedge. You'll never pull one off exactly like it is. But there's things out there called hedge derives, forward contracts. To know whether to use those, to know whether to use options, even whether to know whether to use the cash market, by understanding a hedge, you'll understand what futures are doing for you, what cash market's doing for you, and what the basis is telling you. So we're going to be talking about hedging quite a bit early and how that helps us make decisions. That's sort of where we're going to go over the next couple days. Futures markets. Okay, this is not a definition here of a futures contract yet. We'll get to that, but it's how I want you to think about the futures markets for a second. Think of the futures markets as the world price. In the sense they're set by all the U.S. and world supply and demand information. What's the corn crop in Brazil affects the futures price. What's the corn crop in Iowa, Michigan? And by the way, we have somebody from Texas on this, Virginia, Ohio, Missouri, South or North Dakota, and Wisconsin. And I apologize if I missed one of the other sites. But most of us are here in Michigan. So think of it as a world price, okay? I'm not talking about each individual contract here, but this is a place that happens to be located in Chicago, so it's based off the Chicago transportation from Chicago, which we'll talk about in just a little bit here. It's marketing's like a circle. Somewhere I have to jump in and start talking about it, but there's always one thing I'd like to talk about before the thing I'm talking about, which makes it kind of hard. So here's the world price and supply-demand situation. But as we all know, the futures price is not exactly the same as the cash price. In general, when the futures price goes up, cash prices go up. In general, when the futures price come down, cash prices come down. But they don't always go up and down at the same rate. Prices received by cash market. When I just use the term from now on cash, I'm talking the cash price at the local level. The elevator you go to, or you may deliver all your corn to a hog farmer or a dairy farmer, and that's where you get your cash price. Well, the biggest effect on these prices is still the futures market, i.e. the world supply and demand situation. Cash prices also include a couple things that futures don't particularly. They include storage. Different futures contracts are going to get that, and I'll show you that. But even today's cash price reflects storage costs in the next period. It reflects transportation to the next period, or distance, as I say here. And it also adapts for the local supply and demand situation. Generally here in Michigan, the cash price is lower than the futures market because it costs money, as we'll talk about it, to ship the corn to Chicago. But sometimes we have instances where the cash market might be higher than futures. Why might that be? You have a local ethanol plant, and at that local ethanol plant, and you have a short crop in the area. Well, it costs them money to ship that in. So the first thing they're going to do is bid up the price enough locally. At times, it may have to be higher than the futures price in order to get corn, not only the local corn to come to them, but others to ship the corn in. Now here's the basis. And this is a really important concept. The basis is the difference between some specified cash market, probably for you, your local elevator, and some specified futures contract price. And we'll be looking at the different contracts here in just a minute. It reflects the difference between the world situation and the local situation. As we go through, we'll learn that the basis will tell us, should I store corn? Should I not store corn? And it also gives us a lot of information on which pricing tool we should be using, whether it be for old crop, something we have in storage, or whether it be for new crop. And for the first couple sessions here, we're going to be talking more about the crop we've harvested. And as we progress through the workshop, we'll talk about what I call new crop, such as 2014 corn or soybeans or wheat. Well, I'm going to stick mostly to grains as my examples, and corn because they're funding it a little bit. I will use the different grains because right now I can look at the corn basis and it tells me to use certain pricing tools, and I can look at the soybean basis and it'll tell me to use different pricing tools. However, these same ideas, these same concepts, especially for new crop, are the same for hogs or cattle or milk if you were trying to lock in those commodities. So the basis here, we're going to define it very specifically, and it's different times, it's different ways. It's the cash price, your local cash price, minus futures equals the basis. Or for shorthand, C will stand for cash, F will stand for futures, and B will stand for basis. What makes up cash price? Cash price is defined as futures plus basis. Well, then why did I stick that little minus sign in there? That minus sign is in there because oftentimes our basis is negative. The cash price is less than futures, which will be the example we use tonight actually, and therefore the basis is negative. And when you add a negative, it's the same thing as subtracting it off. So sometimes you'll just see, oh, futures minus the basis, and that's because I'm adding a negative basis. This is a little bit hard for you to see, unfortunately. It is one of the pages that I hoped you would print off, and it's also one of the pages that you should have next year during this entire marketing and pricing workshop. This is, to me, this sums up marketing or pricing. And why do I go back and forth? To me, marketing's even broader than these pricing tools. It's what crop I should grow. It's advertising, it's inputs, it's financing. When I say pricing, I'm more specific to these tools. But the main thing I want you to look at this one for is I want you to look at two different things that can happen. What can happen? Futures can go up and futures can go down. Okay? We don't always know when they're going to happen. When I become a very good weather forecaster, a perfect weather forecaster, I'll then be a pretty darn good price forecaster as well. The other thing that can happen is the basis can weaken, and the basis can strengthen. Now, some of you who have had me in class over the last 30 years or at marketing workshops, notice I've flipped this. An honor student in my class reminded me that this is positive going out here and this is negative going out there. So we'll call weakening the negative side of things and strengthening. Now, what do I mean by weakening? I mean that the cash price is weakening relative to the futures price. So here we have one of the four market situations. Futures are expected to go up, but cash is expected to go up, but cash is expected to go up slower than futures. We'll learn that the market will tell us when this is happening. And we'll be coming back to this a number of times to show why that's the case. So we can have another one here. The futures is projected to go up, but the cash price is projected to go up faster. You'll notice that you've probably heard of things like basis contracts, sell cash buy futures, sell cash buy calls, forward contracts, minimum price contracts. We'll go through each one of them. The point I want to make here is, though, you won't see basis contract or sell cash and buy futures in any of the other four quadrants. Those are only to be used when we expect prices to go up and futures to go up faster than cash prices. And the market may not tell us whether futures are going up, but the market will tell us whether we expect futures to go up faster than cash. As we come over here into this one, futures again are going up. Cash is going to go up faster than futures. And again, the market will tell us that, and we'll learn that as we go through the worksheet. In this case, we might sell cash or do delayed pricing. And again, we haven't defined all these yet. Store cash, excuse me. You won't see those two, 1 and 2, you'll only see in this quadrant, in this market situation. The other thing that can happen, other two things, is futures can go down and basis weakening. And what I mean by that is futures are going down, but we expect cash to go down faster than futures. In that case, we're going to learn we're just going to sell it. In the hedge, but in this one here, futures going down and the cash price going down, but not as fast as futures. That's where we might see a hedge. I'm going to talk a lot about hedging here, but you'll see it's only in one of these four different situations. Now, one could argue that there's 8 situations. The futures don't change and the basis doesn't change. If the futures aren't going up, they might as well be going down. If the basis isn't strengthening, they might as well be weakening, and we'll show you that and why as we go through the hedge. You'll better understand that. It could be futures going down and the basis staying the same. Then it might as well weaken. So you might say that there's 9 situations. I haven't told you the one that goes here, 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 but they all fit into these 4. If we understand these 4, then we're in good shape. So here we have a little bit of review. The 4 possible market situations. Futures up and basis weakening. And remember what basis weakening is. Cash is getting weaker and weaker compared to futures. Futures up and basis strengthening. That's when it's going up quicker. As we saw, there's different pricing tools for each situation. Some tools just price the futures. Others just price the basis. And others price both at once. This is some I'm going to reiterate over and over. We never just make a decision to buy cash. I'm going to sell cash at today's price. Because I like today's cash price. If you do that, you haven't looked at the whole situation. And it may be the wrong call. Even if it's $9 corn, it may be the wrong call. I can't argue it'd be a bad call. I just argue there might be a better call or a better tool to use. So before choosing the proper decision, we always have two decisions to be made. One is the futures direction. Is it going up or down? Now, we're not going to spend a lot of time on that, but as a farmer, as a producer, as someone raising these crops or someone advising somebody who raises these crops, you have no choice but to make that decision. If you don't do anything with your crop, you've made a forecast. And which forecast is it, up or down? If you put your corn in the bin, what have you forecast, whether you've thought about it or not? You forecast prices are going up. Not only have you forecast prices going, because if you forecast prices go down, you wouldn't leave your corn sitting in the bin, or at least I hope you wouldn't. You've also forecast something else. You've not only forecast futures prices will go up, you forecasted that cash will go up enough more than futures to pay for your storage. And we'll show that as you go through. So you are making a forecast. If you sell your grain for cash, you've made a forecast. Okay? You've made a forecast that cash prices are going to go down. So you always need to make it. So you also need to make the basis decision. Do I think it's going to weaken, or do I think it's going to strengthen? Well, we're going to go through theory and then look at some real examples. If the market's very weak right now, the market's telling us the basis will strengthen, that cash will get closer to futures. I didn't say anything about the futures going up or down here. I said the cash would get closer to futures, get stronger relative to futures, or weakening. So if the basis is already very weak, then the call is the basis will probably, I did that wrong. Let's go down back to the previous slide. If the basis is very strong right now, the market's telling you the basis will probably weaken. Or as we'll learn more specifically later, the basis won't strengthen enough to pay storage. If the basis is very weak, the market's telling you something, that it's going to strengthen. It doesn't tell you whether the market's going up or down. So you never make a decision until you've done it. So you never just decide you like the cash price, but rather you like whether futures are going up or futures are going down. So here we're back to the same chart. I don't know what tool I should use. So I look and I think futures are going up. Okay, so we're right here. I also see that my cash price is way below futures. And there's a way of knowing that, and we'll look at that when we go through hedges and when we study more the basis. But let's just say we know from history that today's basis will weak. The cash prices is way below futures more than normal. If that's the case, we expect basis will strengthen. Okay? So let's say we've made that forecast. We may be right, we may be wrong on the futures. We're going to make a decision. We're going to store the cash. because price is going up, and as we'll learn when we go through the hedge, it will not, the price will not only go up, but cash will go up. Not only go up the amount the futures go up, but go up more than enough to pay storage. And again, we'll go through these things. I'm just trying to give you an overall picture of where we're trying to get. So on this here, down here, do I like the futures now or later? I like the futures later. What do I mean by that? Would I rather have the futures here at $2 or up here at $2.25? Or $6 and $6.25? The answer is I'd rather have futures higher. Then I look at the basis. Would I rather have a weak basis, where the basis is way below futures, or would I rather have a strong basis? And the answer is, we'll learn, I like a strong basis. So my two decision is I don't want to price the futures markets right now, and I don't want to price the cash market right now. So I'm just going to store. I'm going to wait. I'm going to delay my pricing decision. If we came down here, the basis is weak. We know it's getting stronger, but we also think the futures is going to get weaker. Okay? That means I like the futures right now. We're going to learn there's a way to price those futures, lock in the futures price. But I don't like this big wide basis. So I'm going to price just the futures. I'm not going to price the basis. It's going to turn out that that's what we do with a hedge, which we'll get to maybe tonight, and certainly by Wednesday evening. We could come back over to here. The futures is going down. I don't like the futures going down, so I like the futures right now. I like the strong basis right now. Remember what strong basis is? The cash price is strong relative to futures. As you can see, the cash price is weak relative to futures down here. So I like futures now. I like the cash now. So I make a decision. I want to price my futures, and I want to price my basis. I've made two decisions. At this point, when I price both of them, that means I'll sell my cash, or I'll forward contract, which sets both of those. So there's a particular time to do it. In each one of these, we do that. Over here, I price my futures. I don't price my basis. When it gets strong, I make my second decision and price my basis, and then later, and then we have our net price. So again, there's two decisions to be made anytime you make a pricing decision. Sometimes we like the futures. We like the futures and not the we like the futures later and the basis now. Sometimes we like the future later and the basis later, so we don't do anything. Sometimes we like the futures now, but we like the basis later, so we only price the futures. Sometimes we like the futures right now relative to where we think it's going to go. We like the basis relative to where it's going to go, so we price them both. And by making those two decisions, you know which tools. Now, for the first couple sessions here, I'm only going to be talking about 1 and 2 on each one of these, the first two. After that, we get into the options markets. And the options markets are when you don't know what's happening to futures. You don't know whether it's going to go up or down. So it's a tool you can use when you're not sure, and perhaps take advantage of something later on. And we'll spend a lot of detail a couple weeks from now on that. So understanding this hedging is the key to understanding this above concept, as I mentioned. So we're going to jump in and learn how a hedge works. To understand a hedge, you have to understand futures, cash, and a basis. So we'll look at some definitions here. Now we're going to look at a futures contract. This is sort of a short version. So we'll read this right here. A futures contract is a legally binding commitment to deliver or take delivery of a given quantity, and with corn it's 5,000 bushels in one contract, and quality, and for corn it's number 2 yellow corn. To deliver, you sell a futures contract, and it would be you've made a commitment to deliver 5,000 bushels of number 2 yellow corn. So we'll get to which one's a buy and which one's a sell. So to sell, if you want to deliver, you sell a contract. If you want to take delivery, you buy a contract. In a hedge, we're going to find out, we're going to really be looking more to selling a contract. There's a reading there that tells you a lot about it. The basic grade discounts and premiums for other grades. But ours is going to be number 2 yellow corn. There's delivery times, and we'll look at that in just a minute. There's delivery points. In this case, it's for corn, it's the Illinois first 150 miles or 100 miles of the Illinois River, the elevators along it. There's minimum price fluctuations. Most of you have watched the futures market jumps around. You know it has to be at least a quarter cent. There's daily price limits. It's up to like 30 cents on corn with no limits on the nearby. And to try and keep somebody from controlling the market, there's different position limits. I suspect no one on this marketing workshop has enough money that we have to worry about this one, but it is important that no one else has it either and controls the market, and that this market truly moves when the supply and demand situation calls for it. So these are some basic rules and so forth. Here's the corn futures that I pulled off the DTN today, so I'll give them a little credit, but it looks just like anywhere else you might do it. Earlier I talked about a specific contract. As you see, we have March 2014. That's a specific contract. May 14, July 14, September 14, December. And in this one here, they quote all the way out to December of 2015. And actually, the market goes out even a little bit further than that, although there's not a lot of volume and it's not traded quite as cleanly. So there's a price. Today when the market closed about 1:30 Central Time or 2:30 here in Michigan, March futures, and these are corn futures traded, and I'll tell you a little bit about these numbers, at $4.3725. Actually, this was this morning, not when it closed. I'll get to the closing a little bit later. So after it had been open a little bit, it was up 3.25 cents. Well, why is 2.25 cents? Sometimes when they're quoted, used to be quoted in the Wall Street Journal, it's hard to find futures prices there anymore. They put a quarter, or they put a half, or they put 3/4. The futures markets are quoted actually in eighths. So this 2 stands for 2/8, which is a quarter. This 4 right below it here stands for 4/8, which is a half. If we get down here to the 6 here, $4.68 and 3/4. 6/8, I tend to use my fingers, is 3/4, of course. So just so everyone's on the same page, when I say 468 and 3/4, you know where it's coming from. There's reasons why there's spreads between these, and we'll get to them in just a bit. But as you see, as we go through the season here, the market price keeps going up. It doesn't always go up in December. It does here. Through the season, it goes up. If I had soybeans up here, which is an example I'll use probably as we get into next week to show another picture, May futures are actually lower than March. June is lower than that. And that's the markets telling us something. Just like these futures prices going up, the market is telling us somewhat about direction and a lot about whether it will pay us to store corn or won't pay us to store corn. And we'll learn also that there's times where the market says, I'll pay you to store corn, but I expect prices will go down. Okay? That's a little bit contrary to what we think, but we'll get to that as we go through today. So we have these different corn futures, these different contracts. We mentioned delivery times. You may be called on to be delivered to. It's the person who has the corn who has sold a contract, otherwise has bought the right to deliver, that gets to determine whether to deliver it. But most of the time when we sell a corn contract, we buy that contract back. And I'll go through an example in just a little bit. Several examples as we go through the workshop. Very little corn is actually delivered on that contract. What do I mean by delivery? Let's say I sell March futures for $4.37. What that means is if I deliver it to the Illinois River at one of the terminals that accepts futures deliveries, I am guaranteed $4.37 and a quarter cents. There'll probably be some processing fees. And the person who has bought that contract has agreed to take delivery, agrees to take it for that. Less than 2% of the contracts are actually delivered on. And we'll see that that doesn't matter. We're still able to use these tools to help us price what will be a cash market price. So the delivery time is the first of the month. These contracts tend to run out about the 19th or 20th of the month, depending on where the weekends are and that forth. We'll find out as hedgers, as marketers, we may be buying futures or selling futures, that we really want to get out of these contracts before the first of the month, because we don't want to be thinking about delivery and we don't want to be responsible to take delivery. So in this workshop, we'll always be getting out of it, but it is important that you can deliver on the market, because we'll find out as we go through a theoretical market here in just a minute. It's the fact that you can deliver is what ties cash markets to futures markets. Remember earlier I said when futures markets tend to go up, cash markets go up. When futures markets go down, cash markets go down. Maybe not the same rate, but they move together. The reason that works is eventually, if it's not working, people are going to deliver, and arbitrage will force it, as hopefully I can explain when I go through the theoretical basis. Okay, we're going to do buying and selling futures here, and I'm going to, you got to stop looking at my face here for a little bit, and I'm going to go through an example of how you can make money in the futures and lose money in the futures. In this example, we're going to think about as if you were a speculator. Okay, and you could be a speculator on anything. You go to an antique market and you buy an old dresser with the idea that you think the price is going to go up and you're going to sell it later. What you're doing there is you're speculating that the price will go up. In this case, we're going to speculate, we're going to look and see, can I make money when the market goes up? Can I lose money when the market goes up? Can I make money when the market goes down? Can I lose money when the market goes down? And it's important that we understand this previous chart. We're going to leave that over here, and then I'll be working over here. Let's say we think, let's get one that's nice and rounded. We think September futures markets, which are 449, are going to go up. So I'm going to buy, okay, September futures at $4.49, okay, because I think they're going to go up. And I think this is the one most people understand. So today is February 3rd. So this is 2, 3. Let's say by the time we go to 2:15, the market has gone to 469. Okay, what could have caused that? Okay, a little bit of drought in Brazil. People don't think there's as much moisture in Illinois as there ought to be. Lots of different things can make that market go up and down. However, let's say the market has gone up 20 cents here, and I think that's as much as it's going to go up. You know, I'm the perfect weather forecaster in South America, so I know we're going to get perfect rain in the markets. How do we get out of that? Well, I have bought this September futures contract, which says I'll take delivery on the Illinois River sometime in September, and I'm willing to pay $4.49 for it. However, I have another choice. Okay? I have bought that commitment. I can sell that commitment. I can sell that September futures at now 469, where it is on, that's a 2 for those of you who can't read my mess, at 469. Okay? So, I paid out $4.49. I then sell it and bring $4.69, and I'm up 20 cents. Okay? So I've speculated that the market's going up and I've made 20 cents. Now most of this workshop I'm going to be dealing with per bushel. We actually know a speculator then multiplies that times 5,000 bushels, which means they've, you know, made up, what would that be, $100 or whatever it is. Okay? So that's how you can do it. However, does the futures market already go up? Let's be more realistic. I'm not a perfect weather forecaster in Brazil. I'm good, but I was wrong. For the first time this year, I missed it. And instead of 215, the market's at 469, or I don't pay any attention to it. Let's say on 230, September futures are 429. Okay? The price has gone down. And I think they're going to keep going down and down and down. And you saw that's happened. I mean, all you have to do is look at March futures from January when they were $6 to, what are they today, 0? No, I mean, you know, 450 or whatever they are. Well, actually, I can look exactly. They were about 447. I think they're going to keep going down. So I don't want to lose more money. So I sell at 429. Okay? So I paid 449. I had to sell them at 429, so I lose 20 cents. So a speculator may make money, a speculator may lose money. This is the one that most people understand. Okay? And we will be using examples like this where we buy futures with the expectation we think prices are going up. But there's the other side of the story, and the one that most of you probably out to understand, but it's for a lot of introductory people, it's the one they don't understand. And that one is, I think the market's going down. So we'll go back to September futures at 449. I'm pretty sure that they're going to go down to 429. Okay? Is there a way I can make money if I've made the correct forecast? And the answer is yes. As a speculator, I don't care whether prices are going up or whether prices are going down. All I care about is that I know whether they're going up or whether they go down, or better put, I guess correctly, they're going up or they're going going down. So I think the markets are going to go down about 20 cents. So I sell. Okay? Think of it this way. I put $4.49 in my pocket. Okay? Futures go down to $4.29. And I've decided I don't think they're going to go down anymore. So I want to get out of this. So I'm going to buy September futures at $4.29. Okay? What happened? Did I make money or did I lose money when it went down? Remember I said I put $4.49 in my pocket? Okay? I only had to take $4.29 out of my pocket. How much do I have left in my pocket? I have a positive 20 cents. Okay? Understanding this concept is one of the keys to understanding hedging. It's the reason, understanding this concept is the reason that we have forward contracts. Okay, where I can lock in a cash price today for later delivery. Okay? If we didn't have this concept that you could make money when prices go down, you wouldn't have any opportunities to lock in prices today for later delivery. So this is extremely important. Now, does it mean the market does go down? Of course not. Okay? So this is on 215. Let's say on 230, and we'll make a little mark across there. September futures, you forgot to get out of them here. Go back up to 469 to keep the same set of numbers. I think it's going to keep going up. So I'm going to buy it back. I put $4.49 in my pocket. I had to take $4.69 out of my pocket, and I had 20 cents less left in my pocket. Okay? So let's think about a speculator here. A speculator can lose whether the market goes up. If the market goes up, they can make money or lose money. If the market goes down, they can make money or lose money. The key is, did you pick the correct direction? Now we're going to learn that we're going to use the selling in a hedge. It's a big concept in a hedge. And actually, once we do it, we're not very concerned whether futures go up or down. And we're going to talk about that right away here. So I just talked about this here and did the examples. I encourage you to do some examples. Take some of these prices, make them go up or down. I find it until you write it out, until you do it. Now this is a little bit of review, this next slide. The economics of the futures markets here. Why do we have them? Because it allows the transfer of risk. Okay? When we do a hedge, you'll learn what we're really doing is transferring the price risk we have on that corn in our bin, or something we're going to grow this next year, and we transfer that risk from us to speculators. Okay? Speculators are wonderful people. Okay? We wouldn't have markets without, because if we didn't have these people willing to lose money, then we could not transfer the risk to them. We wouldn't have hedges. We wouldn't have forward contracts. We'd have even more sporadic cash markets than we have now. There'd be days where we couldn't sell cash because the only time anyone would buy our corn is when they had somebody to sell it to. When our elevators buy corn from us today, most likely they don't know where it's going. But because they can lock in the price they're paying us, they don't have to worry about it. Price discovery. Okay? Remember I talked about supply and demand. In order for supply and demand to be bid, we need a market. Okay? So we decide the soybean crop in South America is getting bigger. People are going to bid that into the market. Information from all over the world is going to be bid in, and we're going to come up with one price for each of those different contracts, and that's the world price at that time. You say, why do they jump around? Well, we all know the situation is changing continuously. All the information's go in one place. Okay? These all 6 of these are kind of tied together. It coordinates economic activities, reduces the cost of marketing, because there's all the prices are in one place, and that allows us to do certain things like hedging and forward contracts. Some people often find amusing here is that market stabilization. Okay? You say, how can the market be any less stable than it is right now? Well, we don't have a lot of examples, but let's say we didn't have the futures market and every single elevator was trying to guess what the price was going to be. Okay? We'd have prices going from 0 one day because we couldn't have a price to who knows what the next day. We have had one market where we looked at it. There used to be potato futures. They jumped around, but it turned out that after we lost potato futures, the market became less stable. Now, potatoes aren't a real good example anymore. There's been a different marketing situation for them. You basically don't really grow tomatoes unless you have a contract with a processor. So it gives us flexibility in these pricing inputs and outputs. Basically, what I mean by that, it allows us to have options, it allows us to have futures, it allows us to have forward contracts, hedging, cash market, basis contracts, and all the type of things that we'll discuss as we go through this marketing workshop. Hedging. Oops, went twice. Here we are. Hedging, I'm going to do a real simple one. Taking an opposite position in the futures market as a cash market at the same time. Okay, remember, and I'm going to show you in a theoretical in a little bit. So what we're doing is we're going to sell in the futures market and buy in the cash market. Okay, and I'm just going to do a real simple example written out again how a hedge works. I'm going to ignore the basis. I'm going to ignore anything like brokerage cost and storage cost, and just show you how, by taking a sell position in one market and a buy position in the other market, as long as they move together, you're locking in a price. So that's the reason why we say with a hedge, we're going to lock in a price. So if we come back over here again, we're going to do a simple one, and we'll keep that same September futures because we already have it, and let's say it's 449. Okay, so this is futures. Okay, I'm going to be simple here. I'm going to say the cash market is also for Did you see this?
What's that?
The battery's low?
Yep.
All right. If my computer goes out, we'll be all right. We'll be right back. So as we look at this, we have our cash market and our futures market. Now remember what the basis is. Basis equals cash minus futures. So 449 minus 449 equals 0. So we're ignoring the basis for a second. Now what are we going to do here? We're going to sell cash and we're going to buy futures. Okay? And let's see what happens as we go through time. And in this example, which is not the normal, we're going to say the basis stays at 0. And again, we're going to say storage is 0 and there's no brokerage fee. It's also interesting, when I say buy, you say a hedge, well, I hear you say store. If you've stored your corn and it's your corn, in essence, it's just like you bought it. You bought the land, you bought the tractor, you bought the seed, you bought your labor if you use some of that. You put all the cost into that corn, you bought it. So a farmer, oftentimes we say buy. If you're an store, if you're an elevator, we say buy, and I'll hit all these points many times as we go through the workshop. So if you store your corn, you're in a buy situation, you bought that corn, you're in a sell situation. I'm not going to spend a lot of it today sometimes, but I'll get into one thing that makes marketing. Some of you say, well, that's short, and this is long. Okay, but we'll get into those a little bit later on. So I'm going to hedge, and by hedging, I'm going to sell futures at $4.49. I'm going to buy cash at $4.49. So I'm just someone who wants to have corn, and I don't want to get burnt by the price. I'm not worried about going up. I am worried about it going down. Let's say I'm buying corn for ethanol or something, but I'm a farmer though. Okay, so I'm going to buy it. Let's say two things can happen, right? Prices, P stands for prices, can go up or prices can go down. What I want to show you with this hedge, it doesn't matter whether prices go up or whether prices go down. You're going to end up with the same net. So when we say futures lock in a price, it really locks in something called a net price, which you'll see here in a little bit. Okay, so let's say futures go to $4.69. Basis stays at 0. So if futures are $4.69 and the basis is 0, what's cash? And of course you're all writing this down at the same time I am, because that's how you learn it. So if the basis is 0, cash price is also $4.69. Okay? Now, how do we get out of futures? If we buy futures and we don't want to take them and deliver them on the Chicago River, how do we get out? Or if we buy. Okay? So if we sold futures at $4.49, we buy them at $4.69, okay? We had to take 20 cents more out of our pocket than we put in our pocket. So let's say we bought or stored corn at $4.49 and it's gone up to $4.69, and the market's now telling me I should get out of it for reasons that we've covered in a way, and we'll cover more specifically. I bought it at $4.49, I sell it at $4.69, I made 20 cents. Okay? So I lost 20 cents in the futures, I made 20 cents in cash. So where am I? Minus 20 plus plenty, my net is 0. Okay, so or let's look at it another way. I sell my cash, $4.69. I lost in the futures 20 cents. I'm back at $4.49. Okay, so either way I go, or so that's what we call a net price. Yes, cash price did go up. If I was a seller, if I'd had it in my bin, I wished I had not hedged. I wished I just waited till the price went up. But do prices always go up? And of course we know the answer to that. No. Prices can go down. So let's look at the situation again here. Okay? I sell futures at $4.49, the exact same. Okay? I store cash at $4.49, again the basis being 0. This time, futures go down to $4.29, the basis remains at 0. So cash goes to 429. Okay. The market tells us it's time to get out, and again so to get out of my futures, I buy futures back. I sold them for 429, the amount I put in my pocket. I only had to pay 429 to get them back, so I made 20 cents. Over in the cash market, it was worth 449 when I put them in my bin. It was only 429 when I took them out of my bin, so I lost 20 cents. So what was my net? This time, I made 20 cents in the futures. I lost 20 cents in cash, so my net was 0. Or, I sell cash for 429. I add my futures, and I'm back at 449. Ladies and gentlemen, we just did a hedge. Okay, so when I say I locked in a price, I didn't lock in 449. Okay, what I locked in was when I take the net, my gains and losses from both of the two markets, I've locked in my net price. Okay, and that's a really important concept. Now you might ask, and this is an important question, why would I do that if I end up with exactly the same thing? Well, as we go through the workshop, we'll find out there's a time to hedge and a time not to hedge. But when I hedge, I don't want to just come out with the same answer 6 months later. I know it's just a few days here. If I hedge, I want to be locking in a higher net return than if I sold the crop today. Okay, and the market will tell us whether that is possible, and that's the type of things that we're going to work on as we go through here. Okay. So that's where we're headed to. Okay? But a little bit more. The basis isn't generally 0, or it's not 0 very long, other than on the Illinois River at delivery time. Back to it again, this is the same definition we had before. The basis is the difference between some specified cash market price and some specified futures market. Now we know a little bit more what we mean by specified. There's lots of basis out there every day. There could be a different basis between each elevator and each futures contract. So let's say your cash price is $4.25 at the Mason elevator, the nearest elevator toward my house, Mason, Michigan, right south of Lansing. Let's say the price is $3.96, which is what it kind of ended up today. And futures are $4.47. We'll look at it. Okay, there's a basis. Okay, which basis? That would be July. So I could have that cash basis between the Mason elevator today and March futures, May futures, July futures, etc. as far as futures markets went. Then I'd have a different basis if I was down at Albion, where we have an ethanol plant. Their cash price is higher. We have the two ADM plants, Weberville and Grand Ledge, on either side. Each one of these different elevators have a different basis, oftentimes, with that. So that's what we're talking about. So when a person says a basis, you have to say, well, what basis? Where are we going? Now, oftentimes the basis is weak generally all the way, or the basis is strong. So if they say basis is weakening or basis is strengthening, that may be a general statement for more than one futures markets. But often, it can be strong relative to one and weak relative to another. The importance here is this, the key to effective base hedging is that the basis is reasonably predictable. Okay? Today, 396. July futures, I think, were 447. We'll look at that in a little bit. So we know what the basis is today, but it's pretty predictable of what it's going to be come July. Probably in that area about 30 cents. We'll find out. History will tell us. We'll just go back 4 or 5 years and say what was the basis in late June of Mason Elevator's cash market or the Weberville market or the Albion market relative to July futures, relative to May futures, relative to March futures. We can get this information by talking to your elevators. The better way is to keep some track of it yourself as you go through time, but that's something that you develop over time. The basis risk is small relative to level of price. We're going to predict this basis in a little bit, and let's say we think the basis is going to be 30 cents at our particular elevator relative to July futures come late June, otherwise just before delivery time. It may not be 30 cents, it may be 35 cents, maybe 25 cents. It may even be 40 cents or 20 cents, but in those cases it's only 5 to 10 cents difference. Okay? That's a relatively small risk compared to what? Futures markets. I mean, there's days where it's odd if the market doesn't jump 5 or 10 cents. Now some of us old timers, you don't have to be that big an old timer, just between 97 and 2006, and of course it jumped a bunch in 96-7. And the futures at days and days were hardly movement at all, or a big movement was a nickel or a dime, where today, nickel and a dime starts to get big, 20 cents starts meaning something. This term arbitrage means basis. Basically that what it means, if the basis doesn't go towards your expectation, then you start looking at other elevators that offer a better basis. That makes your elevator bid it back more towards a reasonable number. And if all your local elevators are not doing it, then people start delivering it to the Illinois River, and that would make your local people bid it. So that's what we mean by arbitrage. Okay? Where are we here? We're going to go through what theoretically cash prices and futures prices would do for corn in a perfect market. Now obviously this comes from pre-2007. We had $2 prices through much of the 80s. A couple times they jumped into the $3 range. We had $2 prices most of the 90s and up to 2006, other than for a little bit 93, then for the longer period 95, 96. So these prices aren't quite as old as you might think, even though for those of you who are curious, this theoretical cash and futures price picture was put together in the late 70s. Some things don't change. The theory didn't change on these at all. So let's look what we think in theory. In theory, with perfect information, okay, the weather does what we think. The yield turns out what we think. The economy does what we think. So people pay a certain amount for meat. So the beef steer producers can pay a certain amount for corn, and everything's known. Okay? If that's the case, in a theoretical market, you notice that July futures don't vary. They're flat. They're the same thing in July, as you see here, for the months down at the bottom, as they are back at harvest time, say October, November. Okay? In theory, that's what it'd be, because what are these futures prices? I'm in October, and the July futures price is trying to predict, or is a prediction of not today's prices, but it's a prediction of what the prices will be in Chicago, on the Illinois River just south of Chicago actually, in July. Okay? And we use towards the 1st of July to get to that. Then we go down to March futures. I left out May futures. We don't need them all to make the point. March futures. same thing. March futures today are a prediction of what we expect March futures to be in March. Okay? Now, so in theory, those would be. Now, the other part of theory is why, in theory, would March futures here be below July futures? Well, if you could get the same price in the Illinois River in March as you could in July, would you ever keep it till July? And the answer is no. I'd sell it in March. Because why keep it to July if I'm going to get the same price? Okay. Well, what would make you keep it till July? Okay. The market would have to pay you at least the amount it cost you to store it. So in theory, the difference between March futures and July futures is the cost of storage. You know, Steve, he's sitting over here helping me here. This is kind of strange here. I don't have anybody making faces at me. I don't have any puzzling faces. And you might think that's great. Actually, it scares the death out of me. But anyhow, we'll continue. So it'd be the storage. Now, would it be greater than storage? No. Because if everybody paid a higher price in July than March than storage costs, then everybody would keep it to July. So in theory, it would be equal. Okay, now let's look at cash prices. First, we're going to go Chicago cash price. You notice in theory it's going up. Okay. Remember, at delivery time, okay, you can deliver cash from the Chicago River for the futures price. So as of July, you'd expect cash prices on the Illinois River coming out of Chicago to be equal to futures. So you'd expect the basis to be what? If cash equals futures, the basis equals, I just heard you all said 0. Excellent group. The same here in March. Futures. Now, let's go back to why was there a difference between March futures and July futures? The cost of storage. If I'm going to store cash, the only way you can get me to store cash is if you're going to pay me for storage. If you pay me more than storage, I'm going to store it all, and that's going to drive down the price in the future and raise price today. Okay, which means you're no longer paying me storage. So it's going to switch. So in theory, cash prices in Chicago should go up by storage cost. Now, we're going to look at it a little bit closer in a minute, but what's our definition of basis? It's cash price, 220, minus futures price, 257. So the basis is what? Negative 37 cents. And we'll look at this several times. So if the basis is 37 cents now, and we project the basis to be 0, that means the market is claiming it costs 37 cents to store it for those 7.5 months or whatever, 8.5 months. Okay? Now, what if we were in Saginaw? Why is, in theory, the Saginaw price lower than the Chicago price? Okay? The only way we can be assured that we get the futures price for our corn grown in Saginaw is if we delivered it to Chicago. Okay? So, the difference is transportation cost. We would expect to be 20 cents, let's say, in this case, we're just making it up, transportation cost from Saginaw to Chicago is 20 cents. Okay? If it was less than 20 cents, no corn would move towards Chicago, and it would lower Saginaw price, so it would be 20 cents. If it was greater than 20 cents, it was 30 cents, I'd put it on a truck or a train and ship it to Chicago. Then Saginaw would need more corn. The only way they could keep it if they bid it up to 20 cents under Chicago. So in theory, Chicago cash price versus the Saginaw price would be the difference of transportation. Okay, this is in theory. We're going to talk, and we won't get to it today, but we're going to talk in the next time about how close is what really happens to the basis and futures market compared to it. Now, here we have a theoretical cash and futures market. From that, and this is hard to see, we can make a theoretical July basis chart. Okay, I'm going to go to just a bigger picture of this one in a second, but I want to show you how these fit together. Okay, what's the basis? The basis is cash minus futures. $2 minus 257 is 57 cents. So the basis is, you can't read this very well, 57 cents. So we start at 0, the base is going to 0, the basis is 57 cents. Chicago, it's 37 cents. Okay, so this is what we call a basis chart. We get the information from up here, we plot it down here. Now, what's happening up here? Cash is getting stronger relative to the futures. That means the basis is strengthening. So in theory, we would expect the basis to strengthen. Whether it's the Chicago cash price or this. Okay? So we're going to look at some basis charts a little later on and say, does this theory here match? Or to just look at the bottom one, here, the bottom half of the sheet that I was hoping you'd kind of print off, but a lot of you didn't have the information till right quick. Okay? The July basis contract. The basis is always something. Now, so here we have minus 37 cents in Chicago. Here we have 0 in Chicago, and as we go past July, we would expect a positive basis as we went in on through to the end of July, and then of course July would end and there'd be no contract. We would expect us to go from the 57 cents to, by the time at delivery time, the 1st of July, to be the difference by transportation. So when we do look at, so what we're going to do is we looked at this basis in theory. Okay. On Wednesday, we'll look at some plots of real basis out there. They'll just be local. You're going to need to check out how your local basis works. And it's going to be very similar though. It's really this number here that will vary the most as we go through. It's this concept that we can predict this basis. In Chicago, it's going to be 0. In Saginaw, it's going to be very close to the transportation cost. And it shouldn't ever be greater than the transportation cost. It could be that we're short crop and we have an ethanol plant over in Caro there, and the basis is less than the transportation cost. It may even be 5 cents under or 0. It's going to turn out that if the basis is stronger than we expect, good things happen. So we're not very worried. We're only really worried if the basis is weaker than we suspect. Can that happen? Yes, it generally can't happen very much. It takes things like transportation costs getting higher. It used to be the St. Lawrence Seaway, when we used to ship a lot of grain out, when it'd freeze, if there was a railroad strike, those type of things could make it wider than we think. So here we go on with about 10 minutes left. So I'm going to start setting this up a little bit. What we want to look at is doing a hedge. And just like we first looked at the theoretical, okay, we're going to do what we call a perfect hedge. Okay? But we're not just going to use theoretical numbers, we're actually going to use today's numbers. If we look at July corn futures here, And I'm going to use the same price on Wednesday, although I'm sure prices will change. We have 446 and 3/4. So I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to round up and call it $4.47 at the market close. I got a local cash price. The local cash price was $3.96. This is the information that you need to do a hedge. We're going to jump past this one for a second. Monthly storage cost. Okay, or it could be weekly or daily. We're going to use monthly storage cost. How much does it cost you to store this corn? Now we're going to talk a lot about this, but for now I'm just going to give you a number. I'm going to call it on-farm storage, and I'm going to just tell you it's going to be 2 cents a month storage. I also have to pay a brokerage. Well, where did you throw that in? Well, when you buy and sell these futures up here, you need a middleman. You need somebody to do that for you. Okay? That's a broker. They charge generally $35 to $50 for a round turn, a buy or sell. Let's say it's 50, you divide that by 5,000 bushels and the brokerage cost is a penny. Now I have left out some things here, okay, about this. I say you can buy futures and sell futures, and I made it a little bit simpler than it is. Remember when I lost 20 cents? I actually am sending that 20 cents into Chicago. It's coming out of my pocket. When I make that 20 cents, money's being put into an account for me. This is called margins. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in ways that you might not have to be in that game by working of an elevator. But at this point, to understand it, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time that you may be having to send margin money in, or margin money is sent to you. Otherwise, the amount you're losing in the market, you need to be sending to Chicago. The amount you're winning is coming back into your pocket. Because we're going to be using it what we call a hedge. So we're not too worried. If we're sending money to Chicago at the same time, we're making money in the cash market. And that's, to show that, I need to do a hedge. But I did it a little bit on paper. When I was losing money in my hedge, I was making an equal amount in the cash market. And when we really want to use a hedge, we want more than that. If we're losing in the futures market, we want to be losing less in the cash market, enough less in the cash market that we're not only paying storage, but we end up with a higher net price at the end of the hedge, even if prices go down, than if we'd sold it before we started the hedge. This expected basis here, I'm going to call 30 cents for our hedge. This is the number I said you'd have to get by keeping historical data or talking to your local elevator. What is it? They're probably going to be a little conservative. They're estimating this number. Later on, I'll show you what they're thinking it'll be. Okay? We might look at a forward contract for July. But those things we'll get into. So for now, I want you to take my word for it. I looked at the historical data, and on average, I think the base is going to be about 30 cents. Might be 25, minus 25, might be. Now, I made a mistake here. I should have put a minus in front of this 30. Okay? Because how did I? Because I'm calling the expected basis a minus number. So I apologize for that. I will write that in, and it'll be corrected when I put these notes up on the web in the morning. And when you listen to this video, it doesn't matter, because you'll be listening to me say I made a mistake. This should be 30 cents. Okay, so we look at these numbers here. So what do we know? We know the futures price today. We know the cash price today. We know the expected basis in June, late June. And remember, if we hedge, we're going to hedge using the July contract. Okay. We also know storage, and we know brokerage. From this information, we're going to calculate, and it looks like it'll be more next time than this time, what it would be. Okay? Now, I have some idea that this hedge will work, and I'll tell you why. In theory, why was March futures lower than July futures? Or why was July futures higher than March futures? Okay? The difference is storage. In theory, it would be storage. What's the difference here? Let's look at that. Let's call that 435 3/4 or 436 in July, and then let's go to May. It's nice they're all 3/4. 441 3/4. What is that? That's 6 cents. The market is telling us something here, and we'll find out this as we go through our hedge, but this is a quick way to see whether a hedge might work. The market is saying from March till May, now we're February 3rd, so we're not in March yet, but from March till May, the market will pay us 6 cents to store that corn. Okay? What's our storage cost per month? 2 cents. March to May is 2 months. That means we'll pay 4 cents in storage, and the market's saying they'll pay me 6 cents to store it. So we're getting to think, hey, I can make a couple cents. Let's then look at May to July. There's a 5 cents difference for that 2 months. The market is very clearly telling us, it's guaranteeing us that the market will pay us 5 cents to store corn from May till March. Okay? Well, that's 2 months again. It's going to cost us 4 cents to store it, but it's still storing us a penny. Or let's do it the other way. 435 3/4 to 446 3/4 is 11 cents for 4 months. 4 months, 8 cents for storage, 11 cents to market, we gain 3 cents. Now that's not all the market's willing to pay us. It turns out what the market is today versus the nearby month, in this case March, will also help us find out whether we're going to pay storage. So that's the concept we're going to, and we won't get to it today, but here's this is the hedge table to print off, and I'd suggest you print off a couple of these hedge tables and have them with you, and also make sure, if you haven't already, print off that seller's price decision maker, because as we go through these, we're going to show you how does the hedge fit on that sheet. So we're going to by hand next week, or not next week, excuse me, on Wednesday, 2 days from now, fill out this sheet here to show you where I hedge. And we're going to go through about 3 examples. Prices up, prices down, where basis turns out what we expect. And we're also going to look at prices up or down, where the basis is a little different than what we think. Instead of 30 cents, 25 cents. And whether we get to it on Wednesday or next Monday, then we'll also look at an example at soybeans, where the market is telling us a hedge won't work, it won't pay, and we'll talk a little about then what quadrant in that seller's decision chart are we in for soybeans, which is different than the one we're in for corn. I have a question down here from Ned Berkey. Is anyone at MSU tracking historical basis? Well, we have about 60 elevators in the state, and we have many futures markets. So the answer is, well, my budget, no. I wish I was. For years we tried to track 1 or 2 bases in the state. So at this point, we're not. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thanks for attention. Oh, we have somebody typing a question here. Given we have 30 seconds to get there, but if we get the question in, if I can't answer it tonight, I'll make sure that I answer it at the beginning of the next step. If so, are we marketing on our own? Do we use our local market? The answer is you're probably still going to use your local market. It depends on what tools. It also depends on your local market. For most of us here in Michigan, we have more than one local market. You know, I have Albion, at least from Albion to Weberville to Grand Ledge, being here in East Lansing, Mason, and I might even go further. And we'll talk about reasons why we may go to less local market, one a little bit further along. But for the most part, we'll look at our local market and try and determine which is the best pricing tool to use given our local market and our futures market. So time's up for tonight. Thanks for hanging in there with me. About 50 people, and we'll start right away. And for those of you who may read this later, hopefully you can catch up and we'll have a few more of the people on the program on Wednesday night. Again, if you have questions, please email me. I should have put it up there, but it's on my webpage. It's Hilker, Hilker, @msu.edu. Thanks, Joe.